Welcome everyone to our new session, and in this session we will be learning how we can split our code into multiple files, because we don't want to write code in one file. Suppose if we have a very big project, we do not want that the entire code of that whole big project to stay in a single file, right? We want to split our code in multiple files so that we can organize our project nicely and properly, and also it is very much nice for maintainability. So that's the reason I'm gonna show you how you can actually split your code into multiple files, and I'll also be recommending you some best practices that what you should do and what should you not do when using multiple files. And also we will also be learning about classes today, and then we will end our session 3, and this session will be the end of our Python basics, and after that we'll be just making new programs and so on, and we'll not be learning anything new. So today is the last session of basics, and after that we'll be just practicing steps. So let's get started. So as you can see in my files directory, I have make two new files actually. One is session3.py and one is helper.py. Okay. And why I have created two files? Because I want to show you how I can share the code of helper.py into the session3.py. So that's the reason I have created two files. So I will just close now my file showcasing panel and start. So here, suppose if I define a function, we have learned how to write a function in the previous session. So if I define a function like this, and let's say it adds to number, okay, we all know how to write a function right now. So if this is a function, and suppose I wanted to use this function in this file, right? Because this function is written in a separate file, and I wanted to import, or I wanted to use this function in session3.py, and that is known as code organization, because we wanted to use the functions and all the other stuffs written in different files into other files. So for that, what we have to know is Python exports everything by default. That means everything you write in this file will be exported by default, and you do not have to do any kind of extra coding for exporting stuffs like other language. So for writing a function, as soon as you write the function, it is exported for you by default, and it is available for other files by default to use it. So for using this function, what you just have to do is you have to say import, and then you have to just write the file name. That's it. And after that, you can just use it something like this. You can print and say helper, and then use a dot notation. And as soon as you can see, if I use the dot notation, I can see my add function, right? I can use add, and then I can call two numbers like this, and we know that the result will be 15. So we here can visualize that the summation, and let me just fix my tabs to 2, because I always like to set it to 2, and also I will go here and set my tabs to 2. Okay, so here you can see that I have defined an add function, and then I am using that add function in the session3.py just by importing the file name and using the dot notation syntax. And after you use dot, I can use anything that's inside this file, and the name of this function is add, as you can see in the top of also. See, here is a function called add, and then we can use this function like that. But you can also import in a different way. Suppose if I write two functions here, suppose subtract, okay, and it will also take two numbers as an input, and then we will just return n1 minus n2, okay. And after doing this, what we will do is we can change this add to subtract, okay, and then we can subtract 10 from 5, oh sorry, from 5 from 10, and then we will get 5. So we can see that both of our functions are working. But what if for this file, what if we only wanted the add function and not the subtract function? In this case, there is a specific way to import only functions. So how it works is we will write from helper, which is our file name, okay? And then we want to import only the add function, okay? And now you see that if I use helper like this, it is saying helper is not defined because we are only importing the add function from the entire file. So that's why subtract is not, helper is not being defined, and also we cannot find the subtract. And now as we have only import the add function, we can directly call the add function like this, and we can add two things. And if you want, you can also import only the subtract, and then we can call the subtract like this. See, so this is like another way for doing our imports, and you can do these imports like this if you want that, okay, I don't want everything, I just want only the add function or only a single thing. And let me also show you, you can also import stuffs that are not functions, which is like variables. So if I say just a string is equal to I am happy, and if I wanted to use this string on this file, what I have just have to do is we can do like a comma, and then we can also use this string, and here we can write str, and if we print this string we can see that I am happy. So I am defining this string here, but I am printing this string on the other file just by importing. And if you don't want to do like this manually, you can just omit everything, and just here you can say helper and there's a dot, and now sorry, you have to write then import helper, not like this, import helper, and then you can say helper dot, and then you will also see your string, add, subtract. So see everything you have here, like string, subtract, add, and if you open, I think if you'll see, you also see these stuffs here, string, subtract, add, which are being exported for you. So now you can also write helper.str, and then you will also get I am happy. So these are the main ways actually I wanted to show you, so that you can understand that you can export everything by default, and there can be multiple stuffs, and everything that is being exported you can see here. And then you can like directly call import helper and use the dot notation for using those. Or also there is an alternative way where you can write from helper and only select few stuffs instead of everything. Suppose we only want add and string, so we will write add and string, and then we can use the string, and we can also use the add function. At that time you don't need the dot notation. So if we run, we will see I am happy and 11. And another thing I wanted to show you is like if there is also a function called add here, okay, and say the name of this function is add 5, so it will add 5 with any number we give him, okay. So what it will do is return n plus 5. But if you write the name suppose like this, now one ambiguity arises. See, either we are using this function or we are using this function. And even we make something like this, like n1 and n2, and say n1 plus n2 plus 5. So we will add n1 and n2 and then also add 5 with this. But still we can see a yellow mark here, and redefinition of unused and from line 1. So it is just saying that here is an add function and you are redefining the add function here. So let's see what happens if we run the function right now, run the file. So we see 16. Why? Because 5 plus 6, 11, and 11 plus 5 is 16. So as we have defined an add function here, it will not use the add function that is on this file, which just adds simply the two numbers. So we can say that we are overwriting this add function with this new definition of the add function. So this is a very important thing. So for that's why for name like conflict, I always like to do things like this. Always like to say import helper, and then if I have to use the add function from the helper, I will just say helper.add, and now if I run, I will get 11. You see? Oh, sorry, I will just delete this one. Okay, now I will get 11 because I am using the add function from the helper. We can see like that, right? And if we want to use this add function, we just remove the helper and we will get 11. Sorry, we will get 16, which is using this add function. So in this way, you can see that there is a lots of multiple ways how you can structure your code. And this was the basics of import and export. The only thing you have to remember is like you can export everything because everything is exported by default from Python, and what are exported you can just see from here because here the variables you can see which are exported, and then there are other stuffs. So the function add, and then from the function add you can see there are two parameters, n1 and n2, which are here, right? So in this way, like the editor is helping you to find out what is being exported and then what you can import. But I always like to just write the file name like this, and then if I need from something from the file, I just use something like this helper.add. That's it. So this was something all about the imports, and now we will be starting learning about classes. But before ending the lecture of import, I have something more important to show that I just forgot. And the thing is like when you start to share files, okay, and share code between two files or multiple files, you always have to use functions, okay? Functions, and this type of definition of variables and all of the stuffs is known as using the global scope, and we should always avoid using the global scope, okay? So what we'll have to do is always define our own functions and stuffs, but not print anything like this. So if I say print string here and say if you do import something like this, so you can see I am saying I am happy, but just a minute. But I have never printed I am happy here, but I have printed I am happy on this file, which is helper.py. So what happens when we say import helper? It goes and runs the entire file, okay, so that everything becomes available under this file. So as a result, whenever we are saying import helper, it starts and comes and execute everything here, and after that what it does is when it executes everything, there is also a print statement. So even though we are only importing, we can see all the print statements that we can make here. So what we have to always do is always avoid doing any print statement directly on the global scope level, which is the first level, because you can see that this is the functions and you can do anything inside the functions. So from either also here, what I will suggest to, instead of directly printing anything, always use a function. So we can define something called main that will not take any parameter, okay? And what we are doing before, we will do that here. And then we will say helper. So helper dot add, and then we can add two numbers like this, okay? And what we will do next is just call the main function. So in this way, we are not using the global scope, and we are also using an entry point, which is the main function. So now if we go back, and we have to remove this because we cannot use any kind of print statements directly on the global scope. Just remember that thing. And now if we run, we will see 13. So we are calling the main function, and the main function is calling print, and the print is saying that okay, I wanted to add helper.add 5 and 8, and so 5 and 8 is 13. So we are replacing this thing with 13, and then we are printing 13, and we are not using this function. But as soon as I remove this, we will be getting 5 plus 8 13, and 13 plus 5 18. So there is an 18 here because we are not using the helper anymore. We are using the set function. And another thing is like there are some standard functions. Suppose we do not have any random file here, but still we can import random things. Import a module called random, and then what we can do is in the main function we can also write another print statement and say random dot int randint And so we can say that okay, we will start it and end at 20, and if we run, so we are getting a random number between 10 and 20. So what you will say that okay, where we get this random, because we do not have any random file here, right? The reason is that in Python there is something called standard library which are always available to you. So that library you do not have to write anything by yourself, but you can use the library code in your main project files just by default. So that's the thing you have to remember, like sometimes you do not have to create your own files. Some files are available to you by default by the program or language makers for you to use. And that's the thing I wanted to make you ensure, so that you understand that there is also some extra files which is standard from the standard library compared to the manual files that you will make for coding or something like that. So I think this is all extra stuffs that I have to say about import and exports. Hello everyone. So now it's time to learn about classes. So classes is something which is very advanced, and I really don't want it to teach classes in basic bootcamp for kids from 9 to 12 years. So that's why in this video I'm just gonna cover the basics of classes, and you can do lots of more complex things with classes, but I will not be covering everything in this bootcamp because it's gonna be very much complex for you guys. So that's the reason I will just give you a basic idea of how classes works and in the session or the basic session classes of Python. So here you can see that we have already learned in our previous class how to define an object, and we have defined a human object which is a name, date of birth, parent, if he is adult or not, and an ability. And the ability has a function which is a lambda function and which is returning I can cook, which is a string. But you do not have to learn about lambda function yet, but just assume that you have an ability function that you can call on every human. And if I show you on the bottom, you can see that we are saying human of ability, and this human of ability is returning as a function, and then we are calling that function. And once we call that function, we are getting the ability which is I can cook, that we can see here. So you can just think like ability is a function which is called, it will return a string known as I can cook. That's it. So this is the human object, but we don't want it to create these objects manually all the time, right? So what we can do, one idea is that we can make this object using a constructor function, and we can see that we have defined a new function called make human, and we are taking parameters like name, date of birth, parent is adult, and power, which are the values of this thing, right? And then what we are doing is we are defining another function inside this function which is known as ability, and that will return the power that we will supply as the parameter of the make human function. And then what we are doing is returning an object like this which is a name which is equivalent to the value of the name parameter, and so on it goes up to the adult one. And for the ability we are saying that it is the function which is this function, and that will return the power that we will be given to this human. And now if we come bottom, we will see that we are calling the make human function with the name, date of birth, parent name, if he is an adult or not, and what is his power. So the first human power was I can cook, but this time we are giving a power of I can play. And then once we have this object, this will be equivalent to something like this human. And then we are again doing the same thing, we are calling the ability on this human that we have made, and then we are calling. So simply what we can say is like we can cross it out, and then we can say we have make another human called human2, and call this something like this, and say human2. Let me just clean it up, human2. And then what we are doing is accessing the ability property, and the value of the ability property is nothing but a function that we can see here. This is that function, and in the power string what we are passing I can play. So if we call the ability function with this open parenthesis, what we should get I can play, and we can see on the screen we are getting I can play. And after that comes the class way. So this is the important thing that you have to come here, and we can do the same thing with a class. So we are defining a class called human Okay, and then this is the constructor function, and you have to write the function name exactly like this. And every time you define a function that is a part of a class, you always need to put the first parameter as a self, and after that this self is actually the object that is being represented right now. So we are saying that okay, self is an object and it something looks like this right now. Okay, and then what, when we say self dot name is equal to name, what we are doing is specifically saying okay, we have a name and whose name is equivalent to name. And then when we're saying self dot dob, and then we are saying okay, then add also the dob, and then parent, and so on. Okay, so at first you can think like this self is like an empty object that we are passing, and we don't have to pass it, the computer will automatically pass it for us, so which is something like this. Okay, and then what we are doing is we are modifying this empty object with we are saying that the object name property will be equivalent to the name property of the parameter of the function. Object date of birth property will be the date of birth parameter of the function, and it goes on and on. And then we are finally done with this thing. And after that we have the ability, and then we are saying that okay, now we have set the power of the object to the power parameter of the function. And when anyone will call the ability, now see, this ability function is the ability of the human, and you can directly call human dot ability like this here, and it will return the self dot power. So now we can also say that we can define a human 3 and just say something like this. And instead we can just here we can say human 3 dot ability. So now we also can call the human 3 ability, and we can run, and we can see I can cook, I can play, I can sing, because I can sing was the last. This was its power, and we are setting the power to the object. Okay, and then when we are calling the ability, so we can see that we are defining an ability for the human. So that's why we can call dot ability, and then we can call the function as usual that we are doing before, right, on the up above. So we all know about objects, so we can create objects dynamically with normal functions, but it is little bit difficult. So that's why we can also create the classes, or the objects via the help of classes, and which is very much suitable and very much nice looking syntax. So that's why we should always use classes instead of writing something like this for dynamically creating objects. And another thing I wanted to make you ensure that if you create an object dynamically using the classes, then this is called an instance. Suppose we are creating a human called Sunil, who has a date of birth of this, and whose parent name is Ralen, and he's not an adult and he can sing. So all these properties about a human, you are creating an instance of human which is having the following properties, right? So always remember that when you create a dynamic object using classes, it is called instance. So this is the thing I have to teach you about classes, and I don't want it to teach you anything more advanced regarding classes, because there are lots of more important things of classes that are more advanced but beyond your age level. So I will end the class lecture here, and I hope you have enjoyed it. Thank you.